budget session number 2. This is kind of a fun build on the budget as we work through different components of it. Tonight, we'll always start these with a budget update. If there's something that's changed significantly from the last time we talked about it, we'll start there. But we'll focus tonight on supplies and services, what some of the needs are and some of the cuts that we've made so far. And then we'll talk about where that leaves some general fund reserve decisions for council to make. You don't have to make those today, but let's start those conversations. And then we'll talk about capital projects and what is next. So really the only major update we have to the budget right now is good news. So we did have additional information that we received from Weld County Assessor, and they are projecting a 7% increase from 2025 to 2026 property tax. So that means about an additional $69,000 to our general fund revenues. So we will happily take that and have gone ahead and updated our projections to include that. And it looked like there was a pretty good breakdown from them: vacant land, residential, commercial, all rows. So we did see a little bit of improvement in oil and gas as well. There wasn't quite that reduction that we saw coming into this year, and so that helped a little bit as well. But good news on that front. So no other changes to revenues at this point. And then hopping into supplies and services. We start each year by looking at consumer price index inflationary basis for our area to better understand what the cost constraints and what those increases are. And this year it was less of an increase. 2.270 was the rate. It's been 4 or 5% in prior years. And so in a year where we think revenues are booming, we project to have additional revenue at the end of the year, we would start our supplies and services budgets by including at least that CPI cost. And the assumption is that some of our contractual costs that we have each year will likely go up by that percentage. But as we know from the last budget session, we're projecting a negative number at the end. So we're in a reduction mode. We're really looking at every cost. We're looking at every department, trying to figure out where we can tighten and reduce some costs. So instead of starting with that 2.27% increase, we asked departments to submit a 5% decrease to their S&S budget, supplies and services budget, and ultimately to tell us what would be impacted, what would they have to do to achieve that 5% reduction level. But the reality is that's a true impact then of 7.2%. And so I didn't want to miss that message. Contractual costs will continue to rise, and we have a laundry list there on the right that is obviously not all inclusive, but costs like the NOCO Humane Society, we have no opportunity to pay a different amount to NOCO Humane if we want to participate in animal control services. They have already assessed those dollars and what Evans' participation is, similar with dispatch for Weld County. That's based on the calls load for Evans, and they have really great calculations on their capital costs and what that means to us as a participant. Police technology and services, they will have to try to figure out what can be sacrificed in their budget to continue to pay for some of the technology and services there. Utilities, IT services, our phones, that sort of thing, as well as our insurance, workers' comp, and property and casualty insurance. Those costs are going up, and we have very little control over some of those too. Greeley Evans Transit's the other big one that sticks out. That's about $258,000 to participate in that program as well. So those are large chunks to our budget that some of them, we can look at. We do go out to bid for our insurance regularly. We do those steps to make sure that any of those that are in our control, that we're getting the best value for the city, but many of them we're not able to. In addition, as departments were submitting supplies and services budgets with a 5% reduction, we said, and tell us what your real needs are. We can't fix something we don't know is broken. And so departments did exactly that and submitted about $6.6 million of requests. And I forgot to leave those at your table. I do have them printed, so I'll send a sheet if Cody will pass those around. This is just summary level on your screen by division or department to kind of give you a flavor of what some of those requests are, but I do have a list that just spells it out in a little bit more detail. If you have a specific question about some of those needs, We could answer those today, or I can provide more information. Ty Bresky's here to, he knows a lot of those. A lot of those came from his divisions. And the reality is, though, that we're still at a negative. So while we're looking at these needs, it's always important for us to prioritize. Thank you, Mayor. Prioritize these needs, stay cognizant of them, and if we get to the point in the budget where we're able to fund some of these things, at least we have the list in front of us, we know what they are, and we can kind of work through those. And or ideally, these are the items that we look at if revenues come up higher than we anticipate for this year. In our first quarter budget revision for next year, we'll start with this list and we'll see what remains a high priority and what might we be able to fund. I have it just broken into 2 slides here, but the top of the handout listed the personnel requests. So in addition to reductions in our supplies and services budgets, we do have divisions that are still struggling with capacity to meet the need to provide their services. Positions like an additional planner to help that process go quicker and smoother here at the city. GIS, we're learning a ton in IT and Public Works about the additional features that having more GIS could mean for the city. Streets and fleet can always use more help. Someone to work more on our asset management components and understand working with GIS on where our items are located, as well as utility engineers. So those are the items that were submitted as high priorities that I wish we were in a year we could go ahead and slot in our payroll budget, but at this point we have done no adding to the budget of any of the $6.6 million. So take a moment and look at that if you like, and we should have time at the end to answer questions on those if you have any. What it means going back to the supplies and services is a budget a little over $6 million. That 5% reduction from everyone kind of rolling up their sleeves was offset by some of those contractual increases that we know still will be in play that we will have to fund. It ends up being a 3% decrease from this year's original budget. And you can see a breakdown there by division or department. I know council had asked, we want to see the line item detail. This is as minute of a detail that we have at this moment, because what we've done is told the departments this will be your budget number unless other changes happen between now and October. They are in the process of allocating those resources to their best and highest priorities and their needs. And so they're still working through that process. And so at this point, I couldn't tell you, fleet has X amount budgeted in training versus a professional services versus a supplies. So they're working on that process right now to evaluate how they can best use these dollars. And a summary level there as well. You'll see the bulk of that is in our general government. It does incorporate a large number of departments under that heading. These are the categories that we report on in our budget book. And then as we've done every year for the past few, I can't remember how many years we've done this, we do also provide a line item budget. So that's online. That's available. It's in council packet when you approve the budget each year in October. That does give that individual line item detail for every department in the city, enterprise funds included, and details out exactly where every dollar is going. So again, we're working towards that product, and that will be available as we get closer to city council considering adoption of the full budget. What we understand at this point as the impact of reductions, we did remove the city council's discretionary grant funds at this point. There are pretty much across the board reduction of training and or memberships. That I hope is a short-term reduction also. We have concerns that as we have newer staff that are in a development track that need professional certifications that the city relies on for having, just for instance, a professional engineer. We rely on not only memberships, but also training dollars to fund that education training as they're getting their experience to have those credentials that provide value to the city. So that is one that I'm a little concerned about, and I hope isn't a every year cut, that we can kind of reduce some of our training a little bit and see how we can weather some of this storm. But this is one that I would ask be high on our priority list as we move forward and trying to continue to grow our professional staff. Will be important that we maintain at some level. And again, I'm not saying that's removed, it's just a reduction. Also reduction of office supply costs, printing where we can, There are some items that had been identified for building maintenance, not only in this building, but operations, parks, that will be looked at deferring. Things that aren't critical, that are, yes, it might cost us more someday, but it's not critical, it's operational, looking at deferring those a year. Reduced funding for fleet maintenance tools and equipment, right as Cameron walks in. That was good timing. And, fleet's a good department that we probably can never fund. Daniel as well, for operations, the needs are high. The needs are a lot. They continue to work with the resources they have to do everything they can, but fleet, parks, facilities, operations, and police absolutely would have supplied budget requests to us in excess of that 7%, had some identified needs, and we had to say, halt, let's start with this 5% reduction. There's some rebuilding going on in some teams. Let's see how we can make these dollars operate at this point as we kind of rebuild, identify where those needs are. We continue to update a 5-year plan with some of these assumptions. We looked at a graph similar when we talked about the revenue budget. Right away, if you go to that net results line, it's the number second from the bottom, you'll see $179,894 is still negative. So what that means is revenues are still not enough to meet the needs of our supplies and services and personnel budgets and transfers. We do have the last year of the $200,000 transfer out to the fire district. We're $179,000 short. And I just want to make sure that, I get in the finance lingo sometimes. So please ask if these things aren't clear. This does not mean we will operate in a deficit next year. It means we will continue to cut until that number is 0 or positive. So we will not bring a budget to you that has a negative around it. That's something we are unable to do. And unless City Council wants to look at funding one-time capital items, that sort of thing, out of our fund balance, we cannot run an operational budget that is in deficit. So while there are negative numbers going out in every year, we will continue to work through this process each year as revenue picture is clear, as we know more about the needs, and continue to reevaluate. And what we hope from council tonight is, and especially as we go into the capital discussion and talk about some of these projects that are priorities, we don't have a lot of numbers for all of those projects either. And what we need to make sure we're doing is creating a budget that is meeting the needs of City Council, that is meeting your vision, that is meeting your goals for the city, so that our city manager can help us put these dollars to work and provide that service that you're asking for, that our residents are asking for. So $179,000, we have some work to do. And I have a calendar at the end. We still have our compensation and classification study to go through. At the next meeting, we'll talk about payroll costs. We'll talk about health insurance costs. None of those are negative numbers. They are all big increases that we're seeing now. We have an employee review team that's working really hard to come up with all of the options for employees. What are the best cost-effective options for health insurance? How can we mitigate any of the cost increases that we initially are seeing? So I appreciate the work that team is doing to provide some options, I think, for everybody. So we'll have some good information at the next meeting, but we'll continue to work with departments. A number of departments have come back and said, hey, I went back through my budget. I know I supplied a 5%, but I could also give, $10,000 here if I don't do this. So folks are continuing to look and see where they can cut costs. So I have high hopes that we can get to this number. We'll continue to make those cuts until we get there. This doesn't feel like the positive conversations it sometimes is it? So moving on to general fund reserve. I mentioned we don't have to make decisions today, and I put some options in the staff report really as things for council to consider as well. But this slide's a complete repeat. If this looks familiar, I think it's so important. I did bring it back. The reason we hold reserves in the general fund, are for a couple different reasons. We have to have the ability to respond to a disaster, an emergency, and you also have to balance the needs of the community and put as much money to work as possible while still feeling like we're properly covered if something did happen. In 2025, that budget identified $6.75 million, and that was 32% of the general fund operating expense for the prior year. So that was the level of reserves that's currently held. That was approved in your 2025 budget. And that was down from 40%. So those of you with more history, you know, in some years we held closer to a 50% level. We brought that down to 40. We put more of those dollars to work. Last year, this council approved a budget with a 32% level. What I'm hearing is a lot of communities are having this very conversation. Hopefully find a little bit of comfort in knowing Evans isn't alone. We're not doing something so crazy that we are the only community facing these challenges that we are. Although that means there's no easy button either, and we're all kind of working through this at the same time. You know, I ask, is now the time to relook at the general fund reserves? We made a commitment this would be part of the budget process every year, that we would look to make sure there's an appropriate level. Where are those risks? Do we foresee a higher opportunity for economic downturn? Do we think there is a larger risk, more need to hold more in reserves in the next year? We know property taxes, we're not going to a vote. We're not asking for additional property tax this year. You know, one idea is, do we hold additional funds in reserve to help weather the storm, to pay for those equipment needs, the infrastructure needs, until we're able to increase the revenues? And I mean, because of it being a one-time source, you know, we wouldn't use those revenues or those reserves to pay for operational costs, but do we want to hold more next year in case we have to pay for something that we can't otherwise fund? What it looks like right now, our projected ending fund balance, you know, everything plugged into the budget the way that we see it now, and this is with that almost $200,000 negative that we will continue to work on. So these numbers will change, but if we're generally looking at a $9.7 million ending fund balance, we had $3.75 million as part of our reserve this past year for sudden economic downturn, and that was either a loss of a major sales tax generator, tightening of industry standards or requirements from the state that might inhibit some kind of revenue stream for us, any kind of major economic disaster. It would help us to continue to pay for costs for the city for some time. We also had $3 million kind of under the category of development and investment opportunity. If the city could buy a parcel of land to redevelop it, to do something different with it, to build a city facility on, or a natural disaster. We thought maybe one of those three things might happen, but the reality of all three of those happening is at the same time was slim. We kind of put that all in one bucket. For sake of discussion, threw another line in here. Would we want to hold perhaps an additional $1.5 million? And I just titled it emergency repairs. We've had a ton of road washouts and culverts and everything else as a result of floods. I don't think we know the true impact of all of that yet. I think we're unpacking that, and okay, good, Ty's nodding. We have still costs to figure out how to fund to repair some of those items. So would it be smart of us to hold additional funds so that we could do some of those infrastructure projects correctly if those come in more costly than our current budgets allow? Or would we want to hold an additional dollar, you know, the $1.5 million, is it emergency repairs and or until we kind of weather this storm and other revenues come and seem more positive? I think there's a few different subcategories you could call an additional reserve if there's a risk that City Council thinks we should also have included in kind of that risk matrix. What do we see that we need to be hedging for, that we need to be prepared in case that happens? And if you think the $6.75 million accomplishes that as well, that's fine too. Just throwing out some options of things that maybe you hadn't thought of. If we wanted to increase it, just in this example, to $8.25 million of reserves, that would be a 36% of projected operating expenditures for this current year. So again, that would go from 32 to 36, still be under where we were 40. It might be a step without going all the way back to 40%. And again, at the end, I'm happy to open this up for conversations on this part. So give it some thought. Even by increasing that, we would still have available fund balance in excess of these reserves of $1.2 million. So there council could look at what additionally would you like done with those dollars that still would be in excess of that reserve. Obviously, if you wanted to not hold 36% and less, you would have more available fund balance going into the budget for next year. Okay, switching gears again. Capital projects. We'll try to go quick and slow at the same time on this. There are not that many numbers you'll see, so it's probably the one budget presentation where we won't go into all the specific dollar amounts. But the takeaway here is that your city staff, your engineering team, and operations team are doing a lot of work to find out the dollar amounts. And so the budget cycle is hitting at a time where we don't have all of the inputs that we need to have good numbers for all the budgets. So what we're trying to do right now is prioritize to align the budgets and the fund and the funding sources with the projects that are the highest priority. And as we get cost estimates, we'll start plugging those in to see how many of these priority items, and they all are, we can fund in any given year, and then we will start to phase them out. What that might mean is you could be potentially looking at adopting a budget in October that doesn't have all of these numbers filled in as well. Our budget's a fluid document. We do multiple revisions throughout the year, and this may be a year where we do a sooner budget revision. This budget is more fluid. It is a living document, and that is intended to be that way. So it might just be a year where we look more consistently at capital projects and costs and funding and making sure that those priorities are in place. So for road projects, the couple of projects we do have funded and slated in next year, I don't have a dollar amount just because it had all the funds part of it, but continuing on 37th Street widening, phase 3 is budgeted and funded next year, as is the additional traffic signal that'll be at 23rd Avenue and 42nd Street. We do have annual street maintenance dollars that have yet to be determined, which stretches of road and at what level those will be used. Somewhere in the $2 to $2.5 million is sitting there with the understanding that we don't know what some of the other costs of these major road reconstructions might be. Reminder on that annual street maintenance, that funding source currently ends June 30, 2027. So your budgets will reflect that. We are doing our best to put those dollars to use in the highest priority projects until that changes, if it does. So the street projects that are high on that priority list, you'll see reconstructions of 49th Street, thank goodness, 65th Avenue, looking at 35th Avenue from Prairie View Drive to 49th Street. That's either a reconstruction or mill and overlay. They're still doing evaluation there. Improvements to County Road 394 and 33. 29th Avenue from 32nd Street to Prairie View Drive, and Trinidad or Pueblo. Those are both being evaluated on what that need might be. And part of that comes from the pavement condition scanning. So it's doing not only the roads, but also curb and gutter. And that plays into how much concrete replacement dollars we need and what the cost of some of these projects are. So this is the list of street projects that are currently the highest priority that we're trying to do estimating for. And then we'll figure out how much we can fund of these projects in 26 and then start to phase out. The food tax fund, we have opportunity to examine some future usage there. The fund balances are slated to increase each year. Currently, we only have the police station debt service in there. We also did appropriate planning at the time that we took out that debt. So we have operation and maintenance kind of O&M cost. Once that building is up and running and out of warranty period, then we do have those dollars coming out of the food tax fund as well. But as long as our grocery sales continue to increase and we don't have any kind of economic downturn there might be opportunity in that food tax fund for other capital repairs. So I think once we get the police station constructed and opened, then City Council will have an opportunity to look at what are we holding those dollars for, what are we planning for in the food tax fund. So give that one some thought. And then we have parks projects largely coming from the Conservation Trust this year for annual improvements to park structures and some finishings of our parks and playgrounds. And we had spent a lot of funds out of the Conservation Trust Fund the last couple of years, so that annual maintenance can happen. Otherwise, I would recommend we give that fund some time to recoup those dollars to do some significant projects in the parks. Otherwise, you would be looking at very small dollars here and there that you'd be able to spend. The water fund is a lot. I will not go through every single one of these. You'll see NISP high on the top of the list there. A lot of these projects are working on that water efficiency plan, the water economics plan, water resources plan. Once we have those outputs from the plans, we'll be able to do additional reprioritization of some of the water projects as well. So I anticipate some of this changing as we know some of the outcomes of those. And you'll see in 25 and 26, 26 is when we anticipate having the water master plan done. So we're doing significant work on the water side to understand what needs to be done for the future of that fund and for the future of water distribution for the city, while we still do the maintenance projects there that we know need to be done. The last one on there, I know Justine had asked, we have some required reporting as well. So we do also have to update a water efficiency plan and drought management plan. So some of those projects are state mandated that we know we have to keep up with while we do still additional planning for the water fund and what the future looks like there. Wastewater fund is a quick story there. You know, a lot of the effort currently is surrounding the wastewater treatment plant expansion. And so they're working through design to identify the best process, what that first phase of expansion needs to be. So there should be contracts coming here in the next few months to increase the design, get that to 60, 90, 100% as we're working through design. I think we're currently only contracted to 30% design. So that'll be a lot of the focus for the wastewater team this next year. We continue to hold money for both equipment and building replacement funds. So we're trying to build those funds too to help with the expansion process. We'll be looking at funding for that piece, both in SRF loans and what we can cash fund and how we can phase this project so that we can try to make it as affordable as possible for the city as well. And then we are just carrying forward some additional costs to the expansion. So we have the design funded. We will likely need some of those early release items, initial planning. So we're looking at building in $4 million in next year's budget to start the expansion process. And luckily, if you recall, when we did the wastewater rate study lastly, those rates had increased and have been increasing, with 2025 being that goal year to be at a level that is able to fund some debt service repayments. So we have been building up for this. Hopefully once we get final cost estimates and we work through design, we'll flesh out that process again and ensure that we have the money coming in that we think we do to pay those debt service payments, at least for the first phase of design or of expansion, and then we'll work from there. So we are planning for this. It does give me a little bit of comfort that this has at least been the last 5-year plan. For the storm drainage fund, forgot a really important note. The storm drainage fund, now I see this one stick out more. We have unfunded projects of like $70 million, and I'll go back and highlight the dollar amount for the others too. There is so much infrastructure needs in each of these enterprise funds. Let me just go back and do it. Water fund has $40 million, and that doesn't include a large capital component like this. These are annual costs. These are what we know today. These aren't other opportunities from our water resources plan and what other options might be. So 40 million I think is pretty low. They probably just got sick of putting things on the list. Wastewater, I don't have a number here. It's less because we're doing the expansion, but there's still a number of sewer lines that need repaired that they see for future expansion for needs. So don't be fooled. There is still a large list of wastewater needs. And then storm drainage is $70 million of identified needs at this point. The pavement, curb, and gutter condition scanning that I mentioned for the road projects will also help identify some priorities here for storm drainage, as will the master plan for the east side stormwater. So those two projects will help to identify those highest needs of the storm drainage fund. Please remember this is our smallest fund. So the ability to fund millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure improvements in storm drainage is not there, not without significant funding, assistance, new big loans, or large increase, which will ultimately be paid for by large user rate increases. So this fund has been building, is just kind of in its infancy, really, as we're working through this, but the needs are there. This is one that's been, I think, put on the back burner for decades, and we are seeing these storm drainage needs every time it floods, every time it rains heavily. And so this one is probably the most disadvantaged of all three enterprise funds, and seeing the disparity between the needs and the money to pay for them. So currently there's only one project sitting here for next year, in addition to East Side storm drainage and needing to come up with the next phase of plan for this fund. And it is outfall improvements at Ridge and Prairie View. So that's still on the priority list, but I anticipate, other needs to be added when all those things happen too. So I nod with Ty that there's kind of a moving target going on right now with Public Works, as they're trying to take, an identified need, come up with cost estimates, and then prioritize. And we're doing this cycle, I think, again and again and again. So, yeah, a little different than some years. I think we generally have, some good numbers and some planned and approaches, at least in September. So this is probably a little earlier than we generally talk about this also. I know they're working hard to have some of those numbers even in the next month. So some of those pieces will be filled in October, but not everything, as I mentioned, and that's okay. I think it gives us an opportunity to constantly make sure that the priorities are the projects that we're looking at, that's where the funding's going, and that we're not married to an old plan. We're not executing an old plan. We're staying fresh with what those changing priorities are. Did I mess with this too much? Okay, fun. Okay, we'll switch gears a little bit. Elsa's going to help me. We talked about these tools, and we talked about them, a year ago. We didn't really use them. We kind of weren't sure, what are we going to do with this? But I think now's the time. It's hard to play with the budget in a year when you have enough money and you go, oh, well, this is working and this is working. But it becomes even more important in a year where we're looking for identified cuts to figure out how could this really look. So just quickly, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but we do have two tools. So the first one is the taxpayer receipt. We had developed this and it was ready to go live if council was going to move forward with the ballot initiative to increase the mill levy. And when you bring it up, it says, hey, will you go back? That's okay. There's a lot going on right there. So when you pull it up, it just says you want a receipt for your current city of Evans. Again, remember, this is only going to show you the 4% of what you're actually paying, but to give you some idea of where it's going. Reminds users our mill levy is 3.536, and it asks you quickly, do you have a home? So if also click yes, and then it asks you, what's the value of that home? So we've been using $372,000 as that average, and Cody's information he's sent out in previous months. And then you can go ahead and click that, and it'll view your property tax breakdown. And it will tell you how the city allocates your property tax money according to our general fund budget, so that you can know where those dollars are going. And users can, there's informational budgets or notes. You don't have to do them now, but it just gives you a breakdown, and you can put any kind of verbiage at the bottom. And for this one, I said, did you know that less than 4% of your property taxes go to your city to provide essential services? Maybe people don't still know that. And then just kind of left it as city council is considering, a future ballot question to increase this. We're looking at ways to fix this and identify it as a need. I think it's important that we continue to talk about it. It's not going away. The numbers, it got $69,000 bigger, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But the need itself is not going away. So this is something that folks can use to look at how their properties might differ from just our $372,000 example. And even on the previous screen, if you're not sure, then it takes you, there are links. You can go to Weld County Assessor site, and it gives them some information of where they can go to figure out what that value is. So that's one tool. And then if you'll move back over to the budget simulation tool. Oh, good. It still has. So don't click out of that yet. What's really neat about this tool is it's fully customizable for what we would like it to say. And so this is still built on the 25 budget because so much is the same. You know, a 5% reduction, a 3% increase in revenues. For illustration purposes, it's very similar and close enough that I think participants get a good flavor of where your money's going. And so we're telling folks you're invited to review the budget. It starts with the revenues and expenditure budgets. It gives you a budget outlook, gives them a link where they can actually see the current budget. They can see the line item budget. They can find all that information. So if you'll click continue, you can also put whatever you want here. And so it asks, are you a resident? You don't have to answer if you don't want, but it also says, do you know how much property tax you pay to the city of Evans? You could put anything we want there. Again, I think it's a good message for them to know that that's a really big issue here. So again, they don't have to respond there. Elsa can go ahead and click continue. And it starts with where the budget's at. And again, you'll see at the top, we had a surplus. The budget that you all approved for 2025 didn't have the negative numbers, as I promised, but not by much, $69,001. That was all the excess revenue that we had that we didn't allocate and didn't need in operational spending this year. So let's start on the left. It does give you a pie chart. Well, no, that's fine. It gives you a pie chart there, or the donut chart of where your spending goes that correlates to the departments. On the right-hand side, you'll see, you know, general government, $5.8 million. What's really cool, if Elsa will click that kind of caret arrow on the right side of general government, it breaks it down to the various divisions that are under that, and they can see, oh, city council spends $112,000. There's an informational button there next to city council. It'll tell the users, here's the type of thing city council pays for, and they can go in and they can go up or down. We think there should be more spending for city council, less spending for emergency management. However they wanted to play with this, you could allocate the resources, and city council, you can do the same and say, I've never understood why, you know, finance spends $1.4 million. Well, maybe if you'll click the little I next to finance, I think this is a good example. Next to the word of finance, there's that blue I. It's always so weird driving it on that screen. It tells you the finance department's responsible for accurately identifying the activities and the financial condition of the city. You might go, yeah, but why do you really spend that much money? You can click the more details box, and it also says these are the things we pay for in addition to citywide utilities. Dang, okay, about $700,000, almost half of that is just general fund utilities to keep lights on, that sort of thing. So there is some context for where those dollars are going, why they're funded to the level that they are. And so again, with that, the up and down button, you can go through and you can change those. Also, go ahead and pick any category you want and maybe increase one and you'll see what happens. Okay, police, great idea. Maybe police should be funded higher. So go ahead and click the plus. It gives increments there. Was it $50,000? And you can see at the top you have a surplus or you have a deficit. So that'll go red. And you know, that sends pretty quick signals to, ooh, we can't have a deficit. It can't be red. So if we want police funded at a higher level, what do I think shouldn't be funded? And they can go through and they can say, again, let's turn off all the lights in the city. Finance needs $500,000 less because we don't need to pay utility bills.
You don't need to see.
We don't need to see, right? No, we'll get headlights. It'll be fine. Yeah, backlit maybe.
We don't need IT.
True.
So
See,
that-
look, this is really helping.
We are saving money right now.
Oh, Chris. He's like, hey.
Although Dan's going to talk about communication soon, we do need communications. Let's not, completely knock it off there. So that gives you the ability on the spending side. And then what's equally as neat to me is the revenue side on the left. And, this is where it's really easy for people, I think, to go, oh, well, let's just increase whatever. And so if you'll open up the sales tax, you'll see, great, we get $11.6 million. there's a red kind of informational bubble there. If Elsa will click on that, it gives residents the opportunity to add a comment. They can say, we should have the highest sales tax rate in Colorado because we've got the best businesses and everyone will pay for it. You know, whatever they want. It allows them to make a comment on any of these that they'd like. And you'll notice there's no plus or minus button here. They can't increase sales taxes. And there's a little lock next to it. And so also if you'll click the blue informational button again, it says, and click more details, expand that to the full information. The sales tax rate can only be increased by a vote of the people. So, you know, it leads you to the path, hopefully, of information. So as you're going, oh, I know the exact way to set up a budget. Hopefully we have some of the limitations built in. We have a similar note for property taxes. Actually, if you would, please expand the property tax category. We put in a lot of the information from some of the mill levy communications work that City Council's done. And so I think we had a couple versions of this going on. I think I changed the language, hopefully I did it all right, to just say, you know, council had considered an increase, and the scenario below illustrates what additional revenue could have been reached or could be reached. Oh no, maybe this isn't the full. We have a few versions going on. We had it ready to go where residents could go in and say, I would vote yes, and it would populate at the top. And Elsa, you can do that. You know, it'll right away default to voting no and giving no additional revenue. If you say, yeah, voting yes, I would do this. This is how I think the budget should be structured. We should have additional property tax revenue. I would vote yes. You'll see the surplus at the top right away to $1.9 million. And hopefully residents can go, ooh, okay, what additional could I do with $1.9 million? What do I think value could be added to the city in these various departments? In capital, they could put a note that said, use every dollar of this to fix one specific park. You know, it would give residents the opportunity to give that feedback on what that priority is, on what they think that money should be spent for if they were the one in your seats creating the budget. So hopefully this is a useful tool. We intend to ensure that the language meets council's current state, which we'll look at our versions, you know, and I'll make sure that it just says, you know, there is a need. You did look at options. It is not going to vote, but here is how those options would have impacted the budget. If you're comfortable with that, I think, you know, they should know where you got to as some options, and they can kind of validate from there. I think, is there anything else at the bottom, functionality wise? No, okay, just verbiage. If you want to take a moment, these links are it's in the packet because it's on the slides, but I'll send out the links so that you're welcome to use them, share them. They are not live. We have to activate them. I wanted to wait for council's okay for you all to see if there's something you really don't like on it. Once they're activated, there is a specific URL for these, and anytime there is a submission button they can do. So I think under the spending on the right-hand side, you'll see submit. Go ahead and click that. I think it tells you even in this, we can have any other language. You know, I'll modify this to say thank you for taking the time to, you know, provide your comments to the City of Evans in how you think the budget should be structured, or, you know, taking the time to learn about the budget even. And then we'll get a log of any of the responses that are put in, any of the comments that come through here. And hopefully there'll be some good information as well. I toyed with, do we want to keep this fluid with the 2026 budget, which we absolutely can do. We can do as many versions of this, have them live or internal use or council only use, whatever you'd like. As we get closer to the known pieces of the 2026 budget, I'd like to do that as well and have that version out there. Probably wait through comp and class and get to a closer balanced budget, and then kind of put that out at least for whatever use you guys would like. And then I think there's some questions on this, so I'll just say, you know, to end, there's a slide in there on the remaining budget steps we'll take. We don't need to go back to the PowerPoint presentation or anything, but comp and class is next, and then we'll do some very intentional looking at our enterprise funds on their own. That will include the refuse fund. We'll talk about the cleanup weekend. We'll talk about the funding levels for that. And if you have identified changes that you'd like in next year's budget for the refuse or that event yet. And then we'll continue to work towards a summary level presentation and conversation about this budget. But with that, I'll stop talking. And I know there's probably questions at any point or, through any of the information we've covered. So happy to answer whatever you might have.
Can I just add for this specific tool, where it says, are you a resident? Can we add an informational button indicating, resident meaning, do you live here? Because I think that's important, because someone that maybe has a specific demographic may think that you're asking if they're legally present here by stating resident. And so I think it would just help provide context. Because it's not a data point kind of.
And they're not questions we have to ask either. So we can take any of those out. Okay.
Do you live here? Just
Yeah,
like a simple.
why don't we just make it simple? Do you live in Evans, Colorado?
Yeah, do you live in Evans? Yeah.
Because I do like it, because if we are starting to get submissions, I would much prefer focusing on submissions that are coming in from somebody who lives in the city of Evans than somebody from Greeley who heard about it and just thought it would be fun to do.
That's what
Also, the second thing that I would suggest is, you know how you went in and let's say you went up on a specific area that brought you at a deficit. I think gathering, I don't know how it would trigger that component. You're at a deficit, and then the question would be like, if property taxes, if you would say yes or no, then it should pop up. This can help this area that is important to you. I don't know if you can do that,
Not
Chris.
that I'm aware of. It's my tool.
Oh wait, it's Jackie's tool. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yes, Jackie.
Elsa and I developed this. I don't think there's a functionality. There is some of it that is fairly static. And so they're like situational yes, no questions that you can add for any of the revenue types. You can kind of put in like a scenario question. So any of that additional context would either need to be put kind of in that intro box as they're just being informed of the process, or at the end, the additional note. We're a little bit limited in some of the informational fields. I'll look at it. I think
that would be
that
amazing
could be.
if you would say, I feel the police department, should be more. And then if there's if you vote for yes on an increase, then that will help, offset that cost. And you know what I mean? Because I think it's important so people can understand how that looks. Like, this is important. You put us in a deficit. So this is what we need to get a positive here.
Okay, thank you for that.
It just helps connect.
All right, so going to some questions about the presentation. By the way, thank you to you and your staff for putting this together. Really appreciate it. All did a great job on it. All right, a few questions for you. So, and I'm not saying I'm for this or anything like that. These are just questions. All right, so looking at the non-personnel request from the general fund, looking at about $2.6 million in fleet equipment replacement, backhoe repairs, and fleet modernization. And some of the things that it listed was an alignment rack lift, tire machine replacements, just to name a few. Just a general question. Could it be cheaper and be more cost effective if we possibly went out and contracted fleet maintenance? Could we see a reduction in cost and savings if we went out to, say, like a local, repair shop here or whatever to do our fleet maintenance? Could we see cost savings in that? Not saying I'm for it, I'm just asking the question, just based on what I'm seeing here.
I don't have an answer to that. I don't know if we're prepared for an answer. If Ty has comments, you're welcome to come up and speak to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Currently, we provide the option and outsource repairs for some of the major repairs with our vehicle. So for things that need fast turnaround or warranty work, usually with newer PD vehicles, we'll send them out to one of our shops. The challenge we're running into is the average age of our fleet is now around 12 and a half to 13 years, especially in our kind of white truck fleet. I think with the bulk of repairs that pop up to that, having an in-house team is probably significantly cheaper than outsourcing those repairs. With PD and fast turnaround times, it is nice to have that resource in-house. It lets us get vehicles back on the road much faster than we could see with some of these dealerships that often have over a week of wait time. So I think it's both cheaper and faster to have some in-house fleet support. However, we do look to outsource where it makes sense. Things like quick oil changes, tire repairs, anything that we see a economic advantage to, we'll definitely pursue.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so my next question is going back to where we were showing the funds of the reserve of the 8.7 or whatever million it was on that. So my question, 8.2, sorry. So my question of that is, I would be in favor of actually lowering the amount from the sudden economic downturn and the development cost and putting that more towards emergency repairs. The reason why I'm saying that is based on all the deferred maintenance that's been done over the years is catching up to us. We know what's going on along 49th Street. We know along all other areas throughout Evans that are in disarray because we have not put money forward to fix these issues. So while I think we need to look at the reserves, I think we need to allocate more money into emergency repairs. That being said, going into my next part of my question, going to the storm drainage enterprise funds. Knowing that we have a lot of needs in that and a lot of deferred maintenance that's been done over the years. I know it's an enterprise fund. Could it be feasible, or could we look at maybe losing enterprise status for a certain time and deflect some of that money into that fund and lose that status and make some of these major repairs? Because here's the thing, deferred maintenance, it's only costing us more if we don't do something about it. Knowing that fund is little balance it has in it and all the needs we have, if that's something that we should look at and allocate more money towards it in these, reserves, I would rather do that. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, great question and great idea. And I think it's a scenario that we're in the reality of currently. So in the year that you lose enterprise fund status, and that means that you have more than 10% of revenue that comes from state or local sources, the general fund being a local transfer. So anything that's not really coming from user fees and system development fees and the basis of what's funding that enterprise. So more than 10% is what triggers that loss. And what that means is we are unable to secure debt in that enterprise fund until you are back to that level, I believe, for one full year. So you lose it kind of on that calendar year, that annual basis. Very, very good idea. A good opportunity for us to infuse money into that system. If council wanted to take general fund dollars and make storm drainage fund repairs, that fund being so small and the rate increases that have been implemented over the last few years means the sensitivity might be higher to a rate increase in that fund already. And so if and when the city has the capacity to take on an additional tranche of debt to do an additional large scale project in the storm drainage fund, user rates would likely need to be increased to pay for that secondary debt source. And I don't know that we're at a position where we could do $10 million of projects in that fund right now anyway. You're welcome to kick me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think we've been operating under, the enterprise status planning window. So we would have to take a real hard look on how much exactly we'd put in and what the biggest bang for our buck is. I think when we talk about the projects coming up on the road side, they all have storm support and storm dollars that'll have to go into the project. And I think, 49th, that road as it exists doesn't have really any stormwater infrastructure between the north and south side of the road. So I think we've been looking more to support those projects with the Storm Enterprise Fund than go out on our own and start, rebuilding connections straight to the river. Part of the challenge is storm pipes are big and big pipes are very expensive.
Well, because that's where I was going to go into. So what my thoughts are on this is I would almost reduce that all the way to the state minimum of 25%. And I would allocate those funds to fix a lot of the deferred maintenance that's been gone out, that has been neglected over the years, because our infrastructure and everything is crumbling because we haven't been investing into it. And this could go, those additional fundings could go in to do that. And I know for my priority, 49th Street is the priority going forward with the additional sales tax funds that we have in there. I know it's not a lot, but hopefully we can get a good partnership with the county and hopefully, offset some of those costs. But I think with all of the deferred maintenance and everything that we know, especially along 49th Street and other parts in Evans like Ridge of Prairie View, and other North Point and other areas in Evans that really could use those infrastructure repairs, I think reducing it to the state minimum and reallocating those resources to that might be a good idea. That's just me. I know you're not a big fan of it, and which is fine, but I'm just saying over the years, Evans has neglected a lot of stuff. Maintenance, and it's catching up to us. And we don't have the funding to do the maintenance. We need to find a way to do this maintenance. Otherwise, we're just going to keep kicking the can down the line, and it's going to get worse and worse. I mean, look at 49th Street. Look at what's going on with the ditch there. Look at all the issues with the flooding that we've had. It's not going to get any better if we don't throw money at it. So,
Yep, fair.
just my thoughts. So, I know you had some questions.
Yes, and in fact, it's on this slide versus a couple, well, dadgummit, it just left a couple before it, when you said that we were, still in a negative. Yes, the negative 179,894.
Yep.
So my dumb question is, because I haven't been on any of the financial committees, so I haven't got the education that everybody else did. I'm sorry, y'all.
Fine.
So how is it we're gonna be, like, still have a bit of an overage, but here we've got at least a net result of negative 179? Could you explain, dumb it down for me?
Happy to. No, not a dumb question at all. And thank you for asking it. I'm sure there's others thinking the same thing. So the net results, that negative 179 is just taking your current year, operational year, current revenues less current costs. So the money coming in, paying for salaries, supplies, services, and our required transfers isn't enough. What we have though is that ending fund balance of the 9.7 at the bottom. That's our savings account. That's what has been built each year when that number is a negative, or that we don't spend additional revenues that come in any one year. So we're required to submit a balanced budget, which means those revenues pay for the operational costs of that year. Then what you're also required to do is hold 25% of that savings account that is 25% of the prior year expenses, so that you can continue to pay your bills if something major happened. The remaining is the dollars that city council then can allocate holding to get us back to that 9.7. So we start with the savings account dollars, and we say, how's our savings account piggy bank structured? What do we want to hold that for? What purposes? What risks do we see that we want to make sure remain in our savings account that we are not paying for? Does that help? A little bit.
I think it's just probably asking how you're going to close that gap.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
And
getting?
how are we going to make that number no longer a
Right.
negative?
right.
Additional supplies and services cuts.
Well, no, what I'm saying, okay, no, hang on, let me.
Oh, please
I'm
continue.
thinking as I talk, I'm so sorry. So we're, okay, sorry. That 1.2 available fund balance in excess of reserves, okay? That's where I'm getting confused. We have 1.2 in excess of reserves, but then we have that negative 179. Is it just different parts of the budget?
It is,
There,
absolutely.
that's what I needed.
And sorry
Got
for
it.
not making that clear. Really,
No,
this is
it's me.
breaking down. Oh, there's a delay. Maybe. I look at Megan like she's doing it. What we're doing is breaking down that savings account on the 972 and saying, here's what you've identified, here are the reasons that you know you want to hold some money aside, but there is still this available, and that it's available because you can either choose to add it to the amounts that you're choosing to save, or you can spend it on one-time needs. And that difference is we cannot spend our savings account on our operational needs. The savings account is meant for the one-time capital, the emergency costs, the things that are not ongoing expenses. That negative number really shows our ongoing revenues and our ongoing costs, and are those structurally aligned so that our paycheck pays for our monthly bills, and that negative says no. So it says, oh good, you still have savings, in our own personal budgets. You might have an emergency savings account that you don't touch unless there's, your car breaks, or you need to move, or there's something big that you're saving for. The city's doing just that. We need to make sure that our paycheck is paying for our monthly bills and our annual bills, but we still have this savings set aside. And it's just important that that level of savings account is being held for the right reasons. And if we're holding too much money, then we need to identify what those infrastructure needs or those capital needs are that we can pay for the city. And if it's too low, we need to come up with a plan to figure out how do we get that to a level that you all are comfortable with.
That helps for me.
But thank you for asking that.
The other thing for me is when you brought up the storm drainage being the smallest fund, excuse me, and then we're talking about 49th Street, and look how many things have failed along it. And it seems that Thursday is our day of the week for storms, flooding storms. I don't know why, but Thursdays are the day. And I just also, I don't see how anyone can say fiscally responsible in the past when you have infrastructure that's falling apart. You have to invest in your city if you want to keep it up. And I think we need to do something about that storm drainage fund. How much do you guys know, guesstimate wise, have we spent this year on emergency projects just for this year?
Last I checked, I've been having Andy Val help keep track every time there's emergency procurement. He's not here tonight. I think he's online, but are we?
Guesstimate works for me.
I know we're over $500,000 of emergency repairs.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay.
Okay, so we're over $500,000. That's now, is that roads, infrastructure, or is it just certain things? Okay.
Pretty much everything that has come up unexpectedly over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, and there's also been some the ditch was water, so that came out of the water fund. I think the majority has been stormwater and roads.
When we've had multiple failures at the Ashcroft Draw.
Oh yes, there has been 50,000 in wastewater up to this point. So it's hitting all aspects of operations.
And that's only what we've touched on so far.
So to piggyback on that question too, so $500,000, is that just a Band-Aid or is that actual repair work?
It's a Band-Aid.
A combination of both. On 65th, we added culverts where they didn't exist. We went from I think a 12-inch pipe to multiple 36s. So in theory, we should put off a washout like that happening again. The ditch, the repairs we made on the ditch in theory are going to last years and years and play into the annual maintenance. 49th, that was more of a Band-Aid. We brought it back up to the standard it was, only because we've been having conversations about such a large investment that we don't want to put in culverts without having that full engineered plan. Because then it's just, we're spending a bunch of money for something that we may be pulling out in a few years. So combination.
So I just, for me, want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't on council at this time, but the reason we had so much in reserves or have built it up is partially because the flood in 13, is that right?
That's part of it.
Okay, so barring a huge disaster, we do still have all of these flash disasters. I don't know how else to describe it. And I personally think we definitely need to be looking at that storm drainage fund somehow, some way. You all, I know, are better at this than whatever I would suggest. So we do need to build that fund up. And I mean, because if we're already over $500,000 for this year, no telling what's going to hit this second half of the year. And like I said, Thursdays are our days. So I just would like us to be better prepared. And again, I just want to throw this out there. I appreciate the computer programs that are putting this out there for the, asking about the property taxes. We need this to stay in front of the voters, because if they're getting more calls for fire department, police, you guys are also getting more calls for services, and we have to be able to fund that. So we really need to keep the citizens informed of all of this. And again, fiscally responsible means also taking care of your city. And I'm sorry, but I don't see that from the past as much as people are pushing it. So,
We are working on it.
no, us, yes, but saying that, oh, we were so responsible in the past, but they weren't. You weren't looking at the infrastructure, the inner workings. And I want to keep that in front of everyone and keep us going forward on building this.
So can I follow on to that? One of the questions I wrote down, I think you kind of actually answered it, was can you save a version so that you don't lose all the project progress we've made on those things if we were to tell you to change it?
A version of the budget
budget,
tool and stuff?
yes.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, so Tammy, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I kind of disagree with you. I think what we need to do is before we go live, we need to save that version because I want it to come back. But I think we need to change it to the street sales tax, and we need to show what happens if that goes away. And we do that until November, and then we can switch it back. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I do too. But I want the taxpayers to know our focus is street sales tax in perpetuity. So that would be my recommendation.
That's a good.
It's
yeah.
built to, let me just make sure that how it functions aligns with how you would like it to function, because it illustrates the general fund budget
Uh-huh.
and not the road tax dollars.
Okay,
So the road tax dollars going away out of that tool have no impact to what residents see on that tool.
that's sad.
I know.
I still,
Sorry.
I'm not upset by that, not at all, but just, you handed me a present, then I
But I
found out it
see your
didn't work the
point.
way I
I know.
wanted it.
I see it, yeah.
But I would still then, in that case,
Keeping the focus.
pull away, say, hey, we do need the sales tax, or that cannot be shown in this because it's a different fund. But have that be the focus for right now, because I'm afraid that if we go live with this and somebody gets on, they're gonna say, oh, those people, they're gonna ask me for a mill levy next year, and I'm not gonna vote for the sales tax this year because of that.
A good point.
And I just get a little nervous about that.
No, that's a good point.
But if you think about it, there is an entity already asking for a sales tax increase this year besides the road
Yep.
tax.
Yes, they
So
are.
that could also affect the road tax.
I don't know about that, but we'll see. So Councilmember Neal, I know you probably have questions. I know we usually always get to you last and we always run out of time for you to get your questions in. So if you have any questions, I'm going to let you go ahead and go.
Well, I think it's beginning to sink in that fully that the deferred maintenance, the ignored stuff has been built up, and they've passed it on to the next council or whatever. And I guess the buck stops here. Because this council's a younger council, and they're recognizing a problem, and they're trying to deal with it. But we haven't informed the voters that what the problem is. And as Councilmember Johnson has always said, the average age is 29. I've looked at some of the records of people that have come in to council and spoke to find out, and sometimes to find out where they live, to go speak with them further. And some of them have only been in Evans for 5 years or less, so they're not aware of why there's a problem. And I don't like being blamed for it, personally. And that seems to be what some former people were implying about this council, that we were irresponsible with the money. And I get that. I have directly got that from some of the people on the east side of town when I'm out having breakfast or lunch. They come up and talk to me and say, you know, this is, why are you doing this to us, basically. And I don't like it. But we have to deal with it. We have to get out there and let the people know that this is what has happened. And we need to get them informed. Some of my questions don't deal directly with the budget. They deal with some of the projects that were up there, that were put up there, Mark. So I'll defer those questions till they come up again.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Councilmember Neal. All right. Anybody else?
Questions?
Couple quick fire things. What's an FRF loan? You said that, Matt.
SRF. It's
SRF, sorry.
sorry, it's the state revolving fund loan. That's what's currently funding the East Side storm drainage projects.
Thank you. Probably it's insurance now that I know what you showed about accounting, but why is HR and risk management?
Insurance, you
Okay,
have it. Yep,
there
all
we
of
go.
our workers' comp and property casualty insurance.
And then I think you really depressed me
Sorry.
because I was reading this and
Jackie.
I thought that number that ended up at 70 million, I thought that was a ticking tally throughout the thing. So we're actually like at $110 million plus of,
Less. Oh yeah.
that's
More?
sad.
Mhm.
Like of the infrastructure needs, the identified needs for the enterprise funds.
Well,
Can you see the look on my face?
great presentation.
Sorry to not have better news.
I'm done.
Okay, I have a question. So, just going back to the question that you had in regards to like the reserves, I would like to hold reserves and add a line item. And the reason why I state this is because we've already spent the money. So moving forward, I want to have some kind of funding there for anything that comes up as we move forward, that is, we're able to utilize it. So I'm for holding more and then adding an additional line item for infrastructure repairs. Now, going back to fleet and building maintenance, I think my question for the fleet component as far as equipment, you stated that the age is 12 to 13 years right now. Where do we want that to be in an ideal?
Best management for fleet is generally around 5 years for police vehicles and 7 to 10 for your, white fleet trucks, SUVs for the rest of the city.
Good information to have. And then, so building maintenance and fleet maintenance, are we able, I have a question mark finding funding for it because I think it's important. I think a lot of things have occurred and it goes back to the deferred maintenance and then also equipment being older. I think it's important for us, kind of like roads, to get, we're trying to get the roads at a specific PSI. I think also with equipment and the maintenance, it is important for it to be kept, because if it isn't, then we have bigger issues in the future. So although I'm not stating like go all out, just continuing to ensure that maybe one of the, if we have, I don't know the number of the fleet kind of thing, cars or what have you, we have that are at that specific age level. But if we can at least start to consider, slowly replacing and keeping, vehicles and equipment at a specific age group and kind of roll that in over the course of time. More than 10%. I do like your thought process when you stated in regards to lose enterprise fund. I think that's creative. I think we need to think like that. Granted, Yes. But I like the fact that we're thinking outside the box. I think it's important. I think we do need to kind of identify what we have first and then start thinking like that, because I think that's important for us. And especially when it comes to the storm drainage fund, yes, it's a lot of money, but as you mentioned, like it's built into, Ty mentioned, it's built into, we tend to build it into like road projects, those big projects, like for example, 49th, it's built into that. So if we can somehow help that in some way, I would be okay with that. Am I clear about that? What else do I have? And then going back to the app, I did see, because you know how it itemizes and there's Culture Park and what have you, and it said 2.8. Is that just a figure, or is it, but it's an actual number, correct?
It's an actual number based
So
on the supplies
I'm
and services.
curious, just because of that breakdown, are we able to also show what our actuals are in spending in each specific category? Because I don't see that we're spending 2.8 in parks, culture, and rec a year.
Is this the slide you were?
It's in the app when you went and you messed with it, because it's like it's like 2.8. Granted, it's all encompassing. It's just based off what I have in front of me. I don't see it.
Sure.
So I want to see that. So that means that if we're not spending that, I want to spend that.
No, and as you expand, that there's other breakouts. too,
Okay,
of
and that's kind
what
of why
those
I was
numbers are.
asking. Okay.
We absolutely can.
So, for that, and then, great presentation. This is definitely, like you said, it's fluid. So as we go, I do like the fact that we're able to amend it as we go, because I think there's going to be a lot of that. And as we start to consider what those projects are and how we get creative, how those conversations shift things around and make sure that we're able to maintain our city, because that's the important thing, and also keep everyone that's here, because if we have our entire staff, then we're able to continue to build our city. So thanks.
Sure, I'll go. I think one of my questions was, it sounds like the outlook for the food tax fund is actually pretty good. However, I'm curious, does that have some sort of reserve or something if we were to experience a sudden decrease in food tax sales in Evans? My concern being our funding for the PD, that we would be able to continue that on.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully everything will continue on well and we can extract some dollars for other projects, but.
Yeah, no, good question. We're not required to hold a debt service reserve in that fund. We did have advantageous grading through Moody's, and our rating agencies and our trustee are not requiring that. I scoured back through language to figure out what that reserve was, and even had to go back to them all and say, where is it? And they said, well, it's not there because you don't have one. Like, good job. Your finances, all the metrics that they grade us on, we were good enough in all of those pieces that they were not required. However, I don't feel that that's good practice to not have that. And so what we're doing is holding at least 1 year of debt service out of that fund, just in case. So we would have an opportunity to figure out what that alternate source of funding would be to pay the debt service for the police station. So you will always see that fund balance with $1.7 million removed out of it for that. We are also ramping up the O&M kind of amount that we anticipate needing in that building. I think we started at $400,000 because we think it might also have to pay for additional cleaning, perhaps additional IT staff to help service that building once they're up and running. We'll know more of those things, let alone just grounds maintenance, building maintenance, that sort of thing. So that dollar amount even builds up. But yes, even still, those dollars are accumulating to where the city could look at what's the next opportunity. Is that it could be used for other infrastructure needs as well. So I think it's something we should look at for future needs. Is there a building, as we talk about recreation needs, and that needs assessment is finalized? how do we put some of the available dollars to work to achieve the goals of city council? That's one that we can definitely look at more.
That's great to hear. Thank you. I think the other thing I want to bring up is, looking at this list of, and I know these were sort of deferred requests, totaling up to almost $6 million, but I think in general, I mean, we're clearly going to have some creative thinking in how we solve a lot of these problems. Like one thing I saw in here is $100,000 to replace trees in Riverside Park. Specifically, that seems pretty high to me. I mean, I understand that if we're hiring a landscaping service to bring in, full-size trees and plant them, that'll be very expensive very quick. But stuff like that, I think if we want to have trees in Evans, we're going to have to think more creatively, put in some smaller trees, consider an IGA with Greeley, forestry, the Weld County Youth Conservation Corps can do some work like that. Just, different creative thinking like that. Like another thing I saw in here too is like a replacement truck for neighborhood services, $90,000. That seems very steep to me. I think neighborhood services could operate with a Nissan Leaf, would be a very effective, type vehicle for the most part. And I don't think those are $90,000. So just in general, I think, maybe we don't need trucks for code enforcement, things like that. I just would like to see some of that creative thinking as we go through these processes. Taking care of our stormwater system is going to be wild. I don't see how we're going to get that done without establishing a source to have some sort of match dollars, and then we will have to have a dedicated team, I would think, to pursue grant funding to the tune of tens of millions of dollars to get that taken care of.
I'm glad to see that we are removing the discretionary grant funding. If we cannot provide essential services, then I don't think that the council should be handing out grant money, even though it does go to nonprofits. We need to take care of the police department and infrastructure and our citizens' needs first.
Councilmember Johnson?
I just want to kind of add to what Kyle mentioned. Some time ago, I think this was last year, we were discussing, I may have said it out loud, I'm not sure, or discussed it with someone, but with the police department, I know we had discussed potentially for vehicles doing a hybrid kind of model, and the reason why is just to help with any gas costs, but we didn't know what that looked like as we were kind of chipping away at what costs were. Again, thinking creatively. And then also that brings to mind as well the police station as well, thinking of, I know we've had a lot of emails about using sustainable materials and stuff like that. That also brings the ability, if we were to pursue that route, for funding, to help fund specific areas of that building. So just a thought, again, just thinking creatively of ways to be able to bring more monies for projects.
Council, when you say hybrid, are you talking about you want a hybrid fleet of hybrid vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that. I appreciate you. I did bring it up, right? Last year, because I mean, it's just as we start thinking, especially now.
I think when we start talking police budget and all that stuff, I'm sure our new chief will be more than happy to explain what the positive pros and cons of that would be.
Of course. Again, it's a thought.
And our design team is doing a great job with FCI on the police station building. So they're looking at, really scoured even this past week, just for some context of where that project is and trying to find cost reductions, right sizing the components of that building, ensuring that we have the right materials, going through and removing items that were maybe a wish list item and not really necessary in some of that, and really doing a great job. And Chief Darlin's done a great job, leading what some of those reductions are as well. We've looked at repurposing different things and what the cost impact could be and what the savings are to the building. So please know there's a ton of that work happening.
Oh, that's great to hear. It's just because we haven't heard any updates on it, and I think it's always important to know.
Yeah, a lot of good work happening there.
All right, Compton Plaza will probably be on our off Tuesday next week.
No, we will not be able to do that on an off Tuesday because we have the consultant scheduled for that. And so it was working with their schedule, and all their other clients. So we're gonna have to go ahead and hold that 19th work session for that. Just two things. If we could get a little bit of clarification, because it sounds like, Mayor, you're interested in pulling down that reserve. Councilmember Johnson, it sounds like you're interested in maintaining or maybe adding to that reserve. So if I could just get guidance from the council on what does the governing body want in terms of the reserve? That way staff can go back and
I think for this year, it needs to go down to 25%, and then next year in 27, maybe.
But what are those things that you're talking about that we need to pay right now? I'm just curious.
There's a lot of stuff that would have, they're still being identified infrastructure-wise, especially along, like Richard Prairie View, all the neglect near on that pond there that's been backflowing for so long, that's got so much sludge in it that they can only open up an inch at a time before that completely floods. We gotta do that, at least that blowout there on 17th and 34th there at that place, because that continues to blow out when it rains a lot.
Mr. Mayor.
I mean, those are just a few things.
Sorry.
I mean, those are just a few of the things that we have to do, but they're identifying more and more as we go along.
And I just want to add one note, and again, I'm thankful for this level of conversation. This is what should be happening here for this. And you can adjust this every year. You can go down. Going up is an assumption that there will be excess revenue to go up in future years. So just like your savings account, if your paycheck's barely paying the bills and you spend down your savings is gone. And, we rely on then excess revenues and budget revenues, which we have been fortunate to receive. So I'm not going to sit here and say that's not an opportunity. It's just a very conscious decision to go down in hopes of going back up. So just wanted to add context.
So I have a question about this. Is there a way, I know we're having the off Tuesday work sessions, could we get a presentation that shows what impact all of this would have if we were to do it? Because I'm inclined to go with Mr. Mayor, because the reality of the situation is we do have so many things we need to fix. But to me, the numbers are so not apparent. And how much do we actually get if we do this, and so on and so forth? And how many projects does that actually support?
6%.
And, make the decision based on that.
See,
And to go back to your question though, $3 million plus probably to redo that ditch and get it back to normal so we can start doing the road improvements on 49th. We don't have $3 million.
And I get that, but I think we need to identify, also, what happens is we need to be structured and have a strategy. What are we prioritizing? We can't just say we're going to we have this here, these here. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in our city, but what are we prioritizing? What are the things that we know that need immediate, granted, there's a lot of things, but what are like the top 3 things? Because obviously our money is not going to extend to do it all. Otherwise we would have done it a while ago. But it's like, I think we need to identify what that looks like, because right now we're stating, hey, let's keep it at 25, but we're not even identifying what that looks like for us. And so I don't want to say, yes, leave it there, and we have money to spend and just start kind of carte blanche repairing things without really having a strategy and understanding how that's going to impact positively in a specific area. Of course, everything that's been deferred needs to be fixed, but we also need to be methodical about it.
So Councilman Johnson, I think that's what I was kind of just trying to ask for, is can we, in an upcoming work session, before we make this decision, have the staff come together, show us how much money exactly that's going to give us and what exact projects it's going to fund, because then we'll have that. Then we'll know what we're spending that extra 7% on.
Yeah, so if for the time being, if the city council wanted to maintain where we are at now, just kind of put a hold on it, then engineering staff can go through and continue that evaluation of what what those projects look like, what are the scope of those projects. I'll also remind the council that we have the strategic planning process coming up here in the very near future. I'm actually working on some information, progress report, economic development progress report for you guys that will outline some of the accomplishments that we've made over the past couple of years, but then also what are some of those big ticket items coming up that will hamper economic development that we need to be aware of as well. So as we're going through these various, whether it's the budgeting process or the strategic planning process, we have a lot of conversations coming up where that'll give staff a little bit more time to get this information prepared, provide scopes, cost estimates, stuff of that nature, so we can have more substantive discussions at that point. But for the time being, rather than sending finance back and reducing that down to 25%, it may make more sense at this point in time to hold our reserve, and then that gives the engineering team more time to do their evaluations.
I too would like to make sure that
yes.
we at least, I'm really uncomfortable with reducing our reserves. You don't get that back.
No.
And I would like to at least look at what we would do. And I agree that there's a lot of infrastructure that we need to repair and take care of, but you have to work with what we have. And we have got a great team that's out there, and my hat off to them. We're working within the means we have, but I'm really uncomfortable with adjusting those reserves.
And we have
especially in today's economic times.
Absolutely, and we have some huge challenges in front of us. If you look at, the mill levy alone, 3.536 mills, that only goes so far. I think we're fortunate to have a 7% increase this year. The unfortunate reality is 7% is $69,000. That's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. But as we look forward for more economic development, we have issues in front of us like that we talk about every year with our water cap and what that additional cost means with the city of Greeley. We have the wastewater treatment plant that we're going to be having further discussions on. I just got an email from Ty this morning that we're at 30%. And so we'll be having discussions here internally and likely with the council coming up of what does that 60, 90, and 100% design look like as we move forward with that project. But one that's really out of our control that I think we need to be very mindful of as it pertains to development is our capacity through Xcel Energy, right? We have a very limited capacity through Xcel that we need to be mindful of as well, because that will impact the growth of the city, and we know that growth plays a big part in what financial resources we have available as we move forward. So for the time being, if council's good, we're going to hold that reserve where it's at. That'll give the engineering team more time to do some evaluations, and then we can have more substantive discussions here in the near future.
That's fine.
Can I ask really quick, when you for Xcel, is part of potentially taking on the street lights a part of that?
So we have completed the
Or just
feasibility.
underneath, is it?
We've completed the feasibility study for the municipalization of the streetlights, and so Curtis is finishing up that evaluation. He's going to brief me, and then I've actually got it scheduled here for a city council discussion coming up. I want to say in early October, to where we can have that discussion as well. If we can, I'm looking at the calendar. I'm looking at the scheduling for additional budget discussions and whether or not it's feasible to move things to off Tuesday nights. I would like to. Like I said, for the 19th, we're going to have to hold comp and class on the 19th because of the consultant's availability. But we've got a lot of discussions that I want to share with you guys. I want the team to share with you guys so we have a more defined picture of what it is that we're dealing with. Also on the 19th, Ty's team is preparing a very detailed discussion about public works, the whole world of public works, what he and Daniel have found as they've taken over parks maintenance, right? We've got some challenges that we have to work through. That's certainly not going to be a sugar-coated discussion. We have some conversations that need to be had because of the condition of our parks maintenance situation. So a lot of discussions coming up. Municipalization of streetlights is certainly one of those discussions that we need to have, wondering, okay, is this the right time to municipalize those streetlights, and what does that return look like over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Yep. I also am a little bit uncomfortable with leaving the next council at the required state minimums of 25%. But I also look back in the past and they had a 50% reserve for years and failed to use it to take care of some of these problems. So it's costing this council a heck of a lot more money to make these repairs. And the maintenance would have been a lot less to maintain the infrastructure, and we wouldn't have the sudden road collapses probably if they'd been maintained. And it's just tough. But I would like to also see what the 7% could be used for, and what potentially disasters it might prevent, costing even more money to fix and on an emergency basis. So I'm in favor of getting a staff report and seeing what we can accomplish with it.
When are we also going to have the discussion about other possible revenue sources?
So we've got, I've got Chief Darlin lined up for a police discussion on September, is that September 2nd, Chief?
19th.
So 6 weeks.
16th. It'd be September 16th. So what we'll do there is we'll revisit the discussion on marijuana that we talked about a couple of months ago, and then we'll also have we'll revisit the discussion on speed cameras as well. And Chief's already worked on that presentation, so we'll be able to have that to further those discussions.
We need to start scrounging for revenue, so let's get that conversation going.
All right, well, thank you, Jackie. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Look forward to the comp and class in a couple of weeks. But thank you, appreciate it.
I love budget season.
All right, next item on our agenda is the communication, or communications update.
Budget season.
Thursday.
Storm day.
I'm taking Thursday off if it's a storm day.
Dude, I'm telling
Why, is there an intended one coming?
I got town hall on Thursday.
Wait, you guys, that's like I can't be there again. I have an event. I need more
Ed.
time.
All right, well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to give a quick rundown of our communications approach here in the city. Been looking forward to this. To kind of just set the foundation, I've always thought that Washington gets a lot of the press. What happens at the State House in Denver gets a lot of attention. Really, I think that your local government, your municipal government, maybe your county, school district, if you have kids, really has a much bigger impact on your day-to-day life. I think that's everybody here. I think, work for this every day. You guys are on the council. I think you guys would agree with that. It's also a important thing in mind that I always say that keeping the public informed, keeping them up to date, making sure they have the information they need for their lives, helps build trust in the government. So it's very important. These are kind of the set of values that I've always operated with them in the almost 2 years that I've been here. But back in the spring, Chris asked me to put together a communication strategic plan. So I wanted to codify those. I don't need to read them. You guys can all read just fine. But that's what.
Thank you.
I don't know.
That's kind of how I operate, and kind of like I said, my guiding principles, the values I try to adhere to. In summation, to take kind of a 30,000-foot view, I think we're doing well. We can always do better. Something Cody's stressed since day one has been always strive for continual process improvement in all facets of our operation. It's something I've always really taken to heart. I always say, you can't hit the ball without taking a swing, right? So try this approach. If it doesn't work, try to figure out why it didn't work and try something else, right? We can learn from where it doesn't work. We can look at things that did work and say, let's find ways to improve upon it. So that's something I always try to take to heart. One focus for me has always been, and I've called it engagement, not just communication, right? Let's explain the why and how not just the what. Let's lead the conversation. Why are we doing this? If there's a change in service, if there's an increase in rates, let's explain why. Let's not just say, here it is, take it or leave it. The other side of that is have two-way conversations, answer questions, provide additional context. Like I say, really just explain the why. You don't want to go in a back and forth really discussion or debate with somebody, but if they need more information, if they want more information, there's no reason not to give it to them, right? Again, comes back to building trust. One thing we do have, as we're all aware, is we do have a large Spanish-speaking population in this city, right? Only some, at this point, of our communications are translated into Spanish. Some of our flyers we do. Cleanup Day is one of them that we do provide in both English and Spanish. I know that Justine has translated some of her water conservation stuff into both languages. And we have some Spanish speakers on staff, and there's always, translate options online, Google Translate. I used it today for a social media post I began. One of the great things for our Spanish-speaking community is that our new website offers customizable language options. Well over 100 different languages the user can choose. Doesn't matter what, and then it'll translate. One click will translate everything for you, and you can get all your information there. So I think one of the hurdles we can overcome with the language barrier is to drive people to the website and focus on that. So we're working on that. Our new website is just terrific. I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but that's been kind of the driving force, I think, to reach that community. One of the things that I also think is really important is work to educate and inform people, right? We do this for a living, 40 hours a week, 80 hours a week if you're Cody. Maybe I'm shortchanging you, boss. I don't know. But, we know this stuff in and out. You guys are on the council, obviously very, very engaged. A lot of folks, they have careers, they have busy lives, they have kids, they have other responsibilities, right? They don't know, and they probably don't care to know in a lot of cases the minute details of everything we do, right? So let's try to find ways. Something I've always done is let's try to provide the context, right? How best can we clear up misunderstandings that exist, clear up misconceptions that exist, So one of the things we've kind of focused on here, and I've been playing around with some different ways of doing it, is getting into, I don't want to say the minute details, because that's not what we're doing, but explaining that, I've seen Mayor Clark chime in on this on social media sometimes. The city doesn't decide what business goes in where. We zone a place commercial. Whatever developer finds a good opportunity to put an entrepreneurial endeavor in there, they'll do it. If the market's right, it's right. We would all love a grocery store. We have to hope a developer at some point will agree with us, right? Misinformation is really the biggest threat in communications. Very rarely have I found that it's intentional or that it's done with a measure of hostility. But it is something that I'm constantly vigilant about and something that can have far-reaching impacts. So always something to keep our ears out for and prevent those from spreading like ripples in a pond, right? So here just a little bit more on this, take a proactive approach, right? Anticipate questions that might arise when we share news about something, a park project, right? Why are you spending tax money building new parks when our roads are in bad shape? Well, we've got to explain to them the funding for those parks comes from our Conservation Trust Fund, comes from our Park Impact Fund. We can't spend that money on roads. We can put it in the savings account and sit on it, or we can build Ridge Park, we can build Da Vinci Park, we can do those kind of community beneficial projects, right? So I've taken more of an approach, again, a proactive approach of saying, when you guys approve a new park project or a new road project, here's where the money came from, here, and hopefully that will head off some of those questions, and as a subcontext will clear up those misunderstandings that people, in a great majority of times through no fault of their own, just don't take the time to really understand. There is always the problem. There are segments of the population that are always just going to have a general mistrust in government at any level, right? From the federal government to the local dog catcher, right? So more we do to build that trust, the more we can do to explain the details, the better we'll be off in the long run. Another thing I've always really worked to highlight is paint the city in the best possible light possible, right? That includes things like as simple as when go out and take pictures around the city, do it on a day where we got blue skies and sunshine and green grass and budding trees, right? It's just a better image for the city. It looks better. Our new website, I think it looks just super, how clean it is, how easy it is to navigate. But somebody, whether it be somebody's looking for a new place to live or a business owner's talking to Brian looking to set up shop here, right? The first thing they're going to do in this digital age is go to our website, look through social media stuff, right? The better image we put out of the city, the better it's going to be for everybody overall, right? So let's use even little things that we can do to put those things forward. We go, when we're communicating, what's the most important? I have, you can see it there, kind of a hierarchy of importance, right? Now, this doesn't mean that 4 and 5 get bumped or ignored when 1 or 2 comes up. It just means that there's a priority, right? We have to understand that we can't inundate people, we can't overwhelm them, because if we're just throwing information at them all the time, what's going to happen? Eventually, they're going to tune us out, right? So we've got to focus on what's most important. If there's a deadline coming up, we've got National Night Out tomorrow. I know we're all looking forward to that, right? Let's start that. Let people know a while before. As it gets closer and closer, if we suddenly have an emergency that's got to take precedence, and that's what people are going to see, let's make sure we've already planted those seeds for National Night Out, for sports league registrations, for whatever it might be. Another thing we've learned from Cody, something that he always stresses, is that we're all one team and we're working for one vision, right? We're executing one role. Everybody has a different responsibility in there, but we all work together. Therefore, everyone in the city, and I am blessed to be supported by a tremendous staff that we have here, do a great job keeping me in the loop on things. I've really got to give a shout out to Ty and to Dan and really the whole operations team for getting information to me when we have one of those emergencies that have come up that we were just talking about in the budget. When that comes up, they get me the information, the exact spot, a lot of times some pictures to put out there. So really a shout out to them for their help in getting that so I can get it out to the public as quickly as possible. We are looking at some ways. There's always ways to do things better. So we've been brainstorming some ideas and might look at some other ways to kind of improve that and streamline it. Because like we say, we can be doing well, but we can always do better, right? Here's our new city website. I'm sure everybody's seen it. Last year, Curtis, Chris, and myself, we were tasked with investigating some new hosts for it. We were displeased with our previous vendor. They were difficult to reach. They didn't offer great support. And we had learned that the new accessibility standards, digital accessibility standards, were coming up. So we looked at some options. We were very, very pleased with several of them, but we ultimately chose GovStack. We've been just elated with the product they've delivered and with the service they've offered. I've had so few questions or so few times that I've had to reach out to them for help with one thing or another. It's really been terrific. Like I said, fully accessible with all the digital accessibility standards, fully compliant. The language options are great, especially like I said, with a sizable Spanish-speaking population here. We have the audio eye, which is something that Chris found that we hooked up that was very compatible with the GovStack platform, which is another layer of accessibility for folks. And we recently added a new AI chatbot that you can put in a question in any language, and it'll just take you right to that information. And we kind of get a report. We can find out maybe where some gaps have existed with that, and then we've been making the updates on the back end with that to make sure that tool is utilized to the fullest of its ability. Pulled our Google Analytics report from our website. I take a look at it from time to time just kind of to see. but we're getting great engagement on our website. In July, we had over 8,000 users, including, it was a little more than 6,700 there that were first-time users. So that's good. That can be people who are current residents, business owners. It could be people from the outside looking in, checking on stuff. So it's good to see that we have that amount of engagement with it. Another thing I found that was really good is people are spending just over a minute on the website. Now you think that might be bad, right? Well, we don't have advertising on the website, so we're not trying to sell anything, right? It means that they're finding what they need quick, and then they're getting on with their day. That's exactly what we want for it, right? With the language options there, again, we have, it's about a 9-to-1 ratio of English to Spanish. We're gonna try to drive that to reach out to the Spanish-speaking community more. Keep kind of pushing that, make sure that population remains just as engaged as everybody else. You can kind of see from that chart there in the bottom middle of the page, the spikes and dips. The dips are just the weekends, makes sense. People are doing other stuff, not really looking up everything on the city. And then utility payments, job openings, recreation, parks, and police have been our most viewed sub-pages. Again, pretty much, I think, in line with what you would expect going in. Like I said, our website is extremely useful as a communications tool. I've been pleased to see the amount of engagement it has. One of the tools that I just love about it is a subscription feature, right? We have, I think, about 8 different categories that folks can go in and subscribe to. Every time I put a news post on the website, I can categorize it. City council, public works, recreation, whatever, police, whatever it would be. And then everyone who is subscribed to one of those, they get an email that gives them a short preview of what the content is, and then a link that takes them right directly to that news post, right? I started kind of working to try to boost that. We got about 120. We're up to 470 as of this afternoon. New subscribers, or total subscribers, I should say. I would like there to be a 0 on the end of that. I'd like to have several thousand instead of several hundred. It's free. It's a great feature of the website. One thing we've heard a lot from folks is, if you have important news, why don't you put it in the utility bill? Given what that costs, that's not feasible. So what's the next best option? On the utility bill, you can see it circled right there. It's hard to read on the screens, but in your packet, you can see it. We use that message center to provide just a summation. You can sign up for free news alerts. There's a QR code to scan that takes you right to that subscribe page. You enter your name, your email twice, select which ones you want, and you're registered. Then you get those emails, you get those contacts, you stay up to date, right? Let's hope we can kind of keep pushing that a little bit more, get some more subscribers, like I said. The hope is, in the long run, that we could use that service to replace Voyant. Currently, we spend about $4,500 a year on Voyant. Again, we just had a great budget discussion from Jackie. That's a cost savings for the city that we can employ if we can use that to replace Voyant. Maybe some other options are available that we can look at as well. There's also the forms function. Whenever somebody puts a service request in, contact the Parks Department, report a problem, generates an email that gets routed right to the city staff that are responsible in that area. We're trying to look at some ways. I know Chris has experimented with one of the options specifically for our operations and public works group, because they seem to get the most, is to kind of create a workflow routing with that. So we know what the problem was. It was assigned to this person. It was resolved, or here were the issues that we had. We're working on building out some ways with that, and hopefully we'll be able to get something like that that'll work soon using this feature of the website. Social media. Well, there's good, bad, and ugly about it, right? We all know that. Great thing about social media is it's super quick. I can put something out across all of our channels in 2 minutes. Type it up, put a picture with it, add a link if we need to, blast it out. We currently have those 5 platforms, right? I do make a point of adding, especially to our Meta business suite, which is both Facebook and Instagram. So one post goes to everybody, or goes to both platforms, and to Nextdoor, where we have a lot of users and a lot of engagement. I say at least once a day. Quite often it's twice a day. When we have an emergency come up, we can do 3. like I say, I try to keep it in that level just to make sure that we're not overwhelming people. I've started experimenting a little bit with posting at different times to see how the engagement fluctuates. We'll get some, Meta will tell you, you have a lot of Instagram users active at 7 p.m. on Friday. Well, 7 p.m. on Friday, those people are probably active because they're at a concert, they're at a ball game, they're at a social function of some sort. They don't want to really hear at that time the road's closed. But that might be a great time to tell them about a sports league registration, right? Might be with some friends. Hey, you guys did the Zumba fitness last month. How did you guys like it? We really liked it. And boom, we get another sign up for that. So like I said, I'm playing with some different ideas with that, hoping to take advantage of that because, like I said, social media is free and it's super easy to access and super easy to use. They do offer some opportunities where you can spend a few bucks to boost your post where it'll show up in a certain geographic area more frequently. I haven't done that. I think, like I said, one of the great things about social media is it's free, and I don't like to spend city money if we don't have to. So, but it might be something worth considering for really important things. If we're having a town hall meeting, that might be something that might be worth spending $100 on to boost for a week or what have you. The other great thing about social media is since I began, we've had just tremendous growth on our platforms. Over 2,000, over 2,600 on Meta, Facebook. We've added a little bit less on Instagram, and our next door is up almost to 8,000 there. So that's all been really, really good news for us, for our engagement. There's a lot of people still that aren't digitally engaged, right? So we still work with traditional media. I had an issue come up today. I was reached out to by Sergeant Trahan, one of Evan's finest, about press release they needed to get out about an issue the police is dealing with right now. Got that to the Greeley Tribune. Press release was great. And I also asked my contact over there if he wouldn't mind sharing it with some of their kind of sister publications in the area. And he said, sure, no problem. Got back to me. It was up on their website, and he also shared it with the Boulder, Longmont, and Loveland newspapers. So we're hoping that'll help out police with that issue that they're dealing with. So let's hope. I try to also lean on the Trib a little bit to get things that we share with them posted on Sundays, because I know that's their biggest circulation. And there are people who rely on the newspaper, right? Whether the physical newspaper, but they also put it on their website and on their digital platform, so that helps us as well. We do the monthly Evans Express. Again, we only have a few hundred subscribers to that. I'd like to see more because it's a good handout. It's a good useful tool. Our physical copies they do go pretty quick. I think I probably print out at least 50 or so of them. We put them up front by CSU, and I've been dropping them off down at the senior breakfast. So that's been good for those folks to pick up. We did our annual report and road tax report. I thought those came out very well. All of our physical copies of the annual report have been taken. We might print some more here soon. That was not a big expense at all to have physical copies of those. Still have some road tax report ones left. I know that's a big issue for the city right now that we're working on, so that'll be there. But this is certainly an aspect of communications that we need to keep growing. Going forward, there's certainly some things we can look at doing. I've talked about using a drone. It would be great to get some photos, some video capabilities, stuff like that. I've been working with our superstar GIS administrator, Becky, on incorporating some of our GIS tools. We actually got one, she got one finished, I should say, on some of our road projects. So we're going to work on sharing that tomorrow and creating that tool for folks to use. I will be attending. I went last year. It was a terrific event. It's the 3CMA conference. I have my list right there of some of the breakout sessions I'm looking to attend this year. Should be really helpful. I know AI is going to be a big focus of the conference this year, so we're looking at some ways to leverage that. Hoping it will be just as productive, if not more so, as last year was. With that, if you guys have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to listen.
Great. Well, thank you for that presentation and everything like that. I know we might have questions or comments, but for the sake of time, since it's 7 o'clock, if you have any questions or comments, just go ahead and send it to send them over to staff for them, and, yeah, and then, just for the sake of time, so. We have a lot of, police officers here, so friends and
Great
families
job.
there, so.
You're doing great.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, appreciate it.